So hello, my name is James Harris, and welcome to today's meeting of the 10100. We're just going to pause the recording while we wait for the lobby to populate and we see who joins us. But in the meantime, has anyone told you that you are awesome yet today? If they haven't, I would like to take this moment to remind you something that I hope you already know, and that is that you are in fact awesome. Awesome. Hello and welcome everybody. I'd just like to remind everyone that they are awesome and yeah, because you guys are. And welcome to our weekly conversation about the 10100, about how we're gonna hopefully get this up and running off the ground and what we're gonna do about it. So we talked last week about a number of different ideas, Laura and I, and yep, that was pretty cool. I don't know, do we want to go over in brief what we talked about and just sort of summarize up what we discussed?
Well, the whole thing was recorded.
It
Can you
was.
add me to my phone thing so I can show John stuff?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, new participants. Hold on.
Mainly just me it from my phone so I can figure out how to do this for John.
Here you go. I'm learning things.
Yeah.
I know this is very strange.
Okay.
So as we do the tech support stuff there, now Geoff, you're probably really new to the conversation about the 10100. Are you familiar with the idea that the 10100 is?
A little, just what you mentioned there recently when we're in Discord or something. It's like kind of a co-op idea for small businesses or to be businesses.
Yeah, it's that's pretty much it in a nutshell. The idea is that we'd have 10 core businesses, for profit, surplus mandate, and there would be 100 members. I'm also incredibly fascinated by what Laura is doing over here.
I'm trying to show him the join audio button. Join audio. You tap it, it goes quiet, or it goes blank, and then you tap it. Should come up. Come on. There it goes. Right there. When it goes away on its own, which is probably the problem he's having.
Right.
Come on, come back. There we go. Okay, tap, and then down there. So just tap the screen. Yeah, I know, it goes away on its own, and then you tap just anywhere. Yeah, but it should come back when you tap on it.
Yeah,
See,
no, I think he is tapping on it, and then it goes to mute. So is there a different setting in there?
Oh, call via device audio. There is device audio, or there's sometimes it's set up for a phone call, but it should his device audio should work. The device you're using, the device audio. Now I've got an echo because I'm on both.
On the one side, it's going to make for a really awesome co-op dubstep mix. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, I'm muting that because it's not necessary. Although.
All right.
So sorry. Still no.
So yeah, we got 10 core businesses that the cooperative will basically exist around. They'll have a surplus mandate. So the idea is that all of these businesses will not only make money to cover their labor costs and their supply costs, but they also make a little bit extra on the side to be able to enable the functioning of the cooperative. There would be, in addition to the 10 core businesses that are there for making money, we would have an 11th core business and administration, I guess you could say, where we would consolidate things like bookkeeping, taxes, accounting, human resources, legal departments, advertising, marketing, all the fun stuff that some people are great at and some people not so much. Making it so that managers who are running businesses within the cooperative will have the time and be able to focus exclusively on what their business needs to run as far as their customers go, and not be bogged down with like trying to figure out which category this particular expenditure goes into, because we have a core team that looks after that sort of thing. The manager just has to get them all the receipts and the cash flow at the end of the day, and bookkeeper looks after that sort of thing. Accounting makes it all beautiful for the for taxes at the end of the year, and for every quarter when we add up what the different businesses have produced as far as revenue, and figure out do we turn a profit this quarter or were we running at a loss, and figure out how we do that. So I just realized that was probably a little rambly. Did any of that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Kind of like
Yeah.
a co-op idea. So 10, 100. Where's the 100 again?
Oh, the 100 is the members of the cooperative. So for this idea basically to work, we need 100 core members to basically be committed to at least one of the 10 core businesses, but with every member being having the availability and the potential to be able to work in any of the other businesses, and provided that they can go through the training to be able to say that I can actually do this job. So, for example, if we had amongst our 10 businesses, we've been last week we were talking about how we could potentially have like a courier and an Uber-like taxi service, where we have, in addition to was like a used car lot sort of thing, where we would have a co-op owned licensed used car lot that would go out, buy cars, bring them back, and then would be connected to a cooperative mechanic shop that would basically specialize in doing electronic conversions or electric conversions from gas guzzling vehicles to electric vehicles. And then in addition to any vehicles that we produce in order to sell to the public, we could also create a fleet of vehicles that the cooperative could then use in order to do a sort of taxi service, courier service that goes up and down the peninsula, and a rideshare program sort of idea as well. Just sort of all bundle it under one particular cooperative business, and then manage it into its subparts appropriately, so that the people who end up being drivers within the cooperative taxi service might also end up being courier drivers, and so we can coordinate sending packages up the peninsula and back, as well as giving people rides maybe to and from Tobermory or Cape Croker or Lions Head or various other places to Owen Sound and back, or having people members of the cooperative actually start up in Tobermory, go down to town for the day, and then come back with their people. To see there being a lot of benefit to something like that as well. And the nature of the digital nature of our cooperative movement allows for the greatest amount of decentralization as well. So it'd be very easy to have, a couple of, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but it'd be very easy to have a couple of cooperative vehicles sort of spread throughout the peninsula with cooperative members, and just be able to coordinate it between people. So this is sort of building on the conversation Laura and I had on the previous Monday. I don't know if that went away to answering any questions or providing any examples that you'd asked for there, but I hope it at least spurred some interesting thoughts.
Yeah, there's a lot of people up there that need to get to Owen Sound and down. Like they seem kind of trapped a lot of the time. Like some of them don't drive, or like they have one buddy that drives and they're already in Owen Sound or something.
Yeah. And if you're someone who has I was thinking earlier on, because I still had a car at the time, so this was on my mind, but one of the benefits of forming the 10 100 is in addition to things like having access to childcare or having access to group medical benefits, which is like one of the main starting points of returning benefits that the 10100 I hope I intend for it to offer. Something like group fleet insurance for vehicles, where you can just either take a cooperative car in lieu of having your own vehicle, or if you really want to keep your own vehicle, you can just make your vehicle cooperative vehicle, and then you get access to fleet insurance as a part of being a cooperative member. So our $100 monthly cooperative fee goes to benefits like fleet insurance and things like that. At least that's the plan at this point. There are probably rules around all that sort of thing that I'm still waltzing through in terms of the code legal on the that Ontario has for how cooperatives operate. I mean, it's a small 98-page law legal document. It's all legalese and lawyerese too. It's kind of fun. But
there's probably a bunch that you could talk to for cooperatives, right? Like farmers market or people who are running one that's similar. They might know a little more about that.
And as a matter of fact, this morning I woke up to a CBC article. It suggested to me as one of the you might be interested in this news article. And it was all about how two different cooperatives from out west. One called the Canadian or Federated Canadian or Co-op Limited, I think. Hold on, FCL is the one. That one's based out of Saskatchewan. And it was in a long-standing partnership with another cooperative business run out of Calgary. And the Calgary Co-op decided to switch where it gets its supplies from the cooperative in Saskatchewan to a non-cooperative in BC. And so that screwed the cooperative in Saskatchewan, and there's a lot of bad blood and lawsuits and all other great stuff. So a rather depressing thing to wake up to if you're interested in cooperatives first thing in the morning. However, the bright side in all of that was when they had the name of an expert listed in there by the name of Tom Webb, who is a professor in St. Mary's University in Halifax out in Nova Scotia, which is that way, I believe, from where I'm sitting. And so anyway, I wrote an email to the professor this morning, and I'm looking forward to receiving either feedback directly from him, accepting my invitation to dialogue about the 10100 idea, or for him to at least pawn me off to at least one of or two of his students who hopefully will be as excited about this idea as I am, but will have the benefit of paying for an education with somebody who's professionally aware of this sort of thing. So hopefully we can get some side benefits there. That's my way of thinking. So exciting news on that part. Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna admit. So I got to keep paying attention to the participation thing here. We might have David joining us.
Hello.
Hey, David.
Hi.
Now we're just beginning to have a discussion about the 10100. I was, oops, Laura's asking for the link. Boom. There we go. Not Laura, Sarah. There we go. Yeah, so sorry, I was just updating people on a conversation I had initiated via email with a professor out in the East Coast about who teaches about cooperatives. So I'm looking forward to some information getting back on that. Yeah, here we go. And golly, the gang just keeps on growing.
I think she's having fun with her audio. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, John, I'm afraid it might just be you. Yeah, I would take it personally. Yeah,
Just open the chat and we can see if you need to say something. We can read it.
that's very true.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, David.
Cool. So I don't know everybody here. I know Laura and John.
Oh,
I'm
golly.
Geoff.
You're Geoff?
Yep. How you do?
Hi, how are you?
I'm Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And we've got the aforementioned Sploopy, who, of course, is the rather world famous James Menzies, one of several, from what I've been told.
Oh, yeah. You can rename yourself.
So, again, on talking about the 10-100 idea, one of the other things I was really excited about this morning, I was thinking about. Oh, yeah, there were two things I wanted to talk about, I guess, today. The second thing is related to where I was talking about with the article I was reading this morning, I should say, about how we had two rather large cooperatives in Canada that have yearly revenue somewhere in the billions of dollars. Like it's ridiculous, just how much
Wow.
money these cooperatives are running in. But their cooperative structure is set up incredibly different than what I'm trying to propose with the 10-100. Um, their cooperative structure was more built around the idea of collective buying power rather than breeding in workplace democracy for the workers and the people who are running the businesses. Although that having been said, I feel like if we as a cooperative do not take advantage of things like bulk purchasing power or through things like I mentioned before, like gaining access to fleet insurance for our vehicles. So as a side benefit of being a member of the cooperative, you don't have to pay your car insurance anymore. You just have to register your car as being part of the cooperative rather than your own. You still keep it, you still use it. It's still your car, but the insurance is now covered under the fleet insurance, and maintenance would be, I guess, a positive upshot to that as well. Well, now we're going to have
Save
to get a
a ton
garage.
of money for a lot of people that they look at, getting a vehicle and they think, oh, well, maybe I can get a vehicle, but then the monthly insurance costs and all this other stuff is just like, that is a huge deterrent for people of low income trying to get a vehicle. So this would be a great help that way.
Yeah, gas costs, insurance costs, ongoing maintenance costs, like those are exciting. Whee!
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I walk everywhere now. It's very difficult to get rear-ended by people on their cell phones if you're on the sidewalk. Now that it's not impossible. In fact, it may increase the likelihood depending. But I don't know. I got rear-ended by at least two, if not three, different people who were on cell phones when I was living down in Toronto. Eeh, not so much fun. But that's an aside. You know what? Completely different tangent. I personally cannot wait for self-driving cars. That's all I got to say.
I don't know. That scares me. I'd rather be in control.
No, I've
There's only
seen
been one.
Yeah, but you're a responsible driver.
There's only
You're
been
a-
one accident with a self-drive car that wasn't man caused.
Hi, James.
Hey,
Can you put your video on?
hmm?
Can you put your video on?
No.
No? Okay.
and
all
I
right.
respect
Good to
your
hear you.
choice.
It's good to hear you.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to explore is conflict resolution within the cooperative, because that's something to figure out, I think sooner rather than later, by virtue of the fact that the cooperative movement can be a very democratic enterprise. I would love to keep in that sort of standard. So trying to figure out how do we resolve a conflict of opinions or conflict of maybe even declaring interests, conflict of interests amongst people within the cooperative. how do we adjudicate things like that? And I don't have necessarily any answers on that, and I'd be very interested to hear people's thoughts on that, or if they have any thoughts.
Well, I think, for any sort of large organization, you are going to have to develop a code of ethics and standards of practice that will be applicable to absolutely everybody who signs on to take part in that. So right away, that's going to set some groundwork for what those interaction guidelines are, and just like you said, avoiding conflict of interest and so on. So yeah, really having a firm and specific code of ethics for that, for the co-op, is going to be huge.
Yeah, I like that. I toyed with the idea very early on of sort of like making a condition of being a cooperative member, of being able to sign on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And if you couldn't do that, you couldn't be a member.
I mean, makes sense.
I think too, though, like, you have to realize that, true democracy is not entirely realistic, and yeah, there are absolutely going to be differences, and it's not even about reconciling those differences. It's about, okay, how are we going to stick to these ethical expectations and these practices that we have set out here, and still maintain respect for one another, but still function within that business model at the same time. And part of that is just being a mature grown-up.
Mature grown-up, unfortunately, has so many different people have so many different interpretations as to what that means, or standards, certainly that we apply to our own selves, that are different from others.
Just don't be a dick. Even if you don't agree with someone, don't be a dick.
Yeah, so disagree, but don't be disagreeable.
Yeah. I met a few people that are, being an adult means agreeing with me all the time about everything. And it's like, no, that's not how it works.
No.
We were talking about his constitutionalism.
Yeah, Curtis is hanging out with me here in the attic, and he's indicating that this is called constitutionalism.
Well, it's like universities have charters, right? Banks have charters. Those are their governing protocol.
Oh, okay, so in this particular case, in co-op language, these would be called bylaws.
Yeah.
So when a co-op comes together, this is as far as I've figured out in the law for Ontario, because Ontario has an entire set of laws specifically for governing how worker-owned cooperatives work in Ontario. So on one hand, there's already a framework out there that is prescribed for the kind of business that we want to do or would like to potentially do. And it's just a matter of complying with the law and figuring out how the 10-100 model would fit within it. And so far, it does. There's nothing within the cooperative law structure that I can tell that would preclude us from being able to create a cooperative business that its business is to operate 10 sub-businesses underneath it that are comprised of the 100 members, and then the system through which we determine how we divide up the dividend shares is perfectly fine, so long as everybody in the cooperative agrees to it. And run out of time. We've removed the 40 minutes. Oh, I love it. God bless them, whoever he is. Anyway, old habits die hard. What was I saying? Something about the 10-100. Oh, legal corporations. And oh shoot, there was something somebody said, and I was trying to address it. Does anybody remember now?
Dividends, dividing up shares, and
oh yeah. So yeah, right. So getting back to democracy and how it gets messy. when we ratify, when we come together, when we get our 100 people, we all agree on our 10 businesses, at that point, we all agree on the bylaws. And so what you're talking about, Sarah, these are the bylaws. So the code of ethics, that would be part of the bylaws that we would all agree to when we come together to ratify. And then a condition of membership going forward for anybody who would then go on to become a member of the cooperative would then be to ratify the agreed upon bylaws that we all basically incorporate under. And then from that point on, we decide potentially once a quarter, because the way the TOM 100 is set up to have quarterly meetings, at least, if not monthly meetings for every single business group, where you get an update for the business standing of where the cooperative is at, how specifically your business did in the month, but over the quarter, how all the cooperative businesses did together, which is important because that's going to determine how much our dividend share is worth. But I'm getting away from the point. The bylaws, ethics, we can just have a standard of ethics right from the very beginning that sort of spells out where the boundaries are, where as members, what we have access to and what we don't have access to. Like no cooperative manager can tell people to work more than is legally compelled. Really, I don't know. Hold on. I'm beginning to mumble now because I'm still thinking about this kind of stuff. Yeah.
I think
Now
though,
I'm thinking off the top of my head. Mhm.
and I think once you have a really clear and tangible business model, like actually drawing up a concept model, yay! The other stuff will start to look. the other stuff like the bylaws will come naturally from that as you work out those details of what exactly this is going to look like in practice. Yeah, you kind of need to have that in place before you get into those sort of higher ideals of how will that model then operate. So
one of the homegrown rules I would love to bake into the 10-100 idea, especially as it relates to the Grey Bruce, and what we're building here, is I would love to have something as interesting as when our monthly meetings happen, that they become almost like potlucks, for lack of a better term. And when we have our quarterly meetings, they become large celebrations as well, where in addition to doing business, we're also doing something where we're building a community that our businesses are growing out of, and that we're also we recognize that businesses going forward don't have just to be about making money. They can be about making the community that we live in a better place. And that's the purpose of doing business this way. It's not just about the money. It's about creating the world that we want to live in and pooling our resources to do that.
So when you have a mission statement laid out, or or a goal and the mission statement, then the code of ethics will be easier to create as well.
Well,
that's a good
talking
point.
about it, like it's not the same.
Do you want to
thing.
join?
No, it's not the same thing by far. But you're talking about intentional community, right?
Well, I'm talking about intentional community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what you're talking about is like if you put it in a different context, the rule, like monastic rule, right? It's like
there are monastic traditions that may have employed ways of doing things. I'm not too sure that that's necessarily where I want to take 100 in though.
No.
Direction.
He wants to start an intentional community where everybody's a bodhisattva and they have to abide by certain rules and wear certain clothes. And I'm just like, yeah,
But those are the tensions, right? Is like you
Mhm.
said that everybody in the 10-100, but like that may not, like Sarah said, it may not be functional, right? So it's like, what is quorum?
Well, when we have 100 members, quorum should be. Oh, that is a good question. What should quorum be? Does everybody
Typically,
understand what
it's
quorum is?
51%. Like in most organizations, quorum is 51%.
Hmm.
Sorry, what is that term? I don't know what that means.
The quorum is the minimum amount of people that you would need in order for any decision to be made by the people present to be legally recognized, if I understand that
Okay.
correctly.
So like when a board of directors meets or something, you have to have at least 51% of the voting members present in order to have a meeting, because otherwise, like, there's just not majority.
Yeah, if we do it by UN rules too, that's where it has to be 100%. That
Oh.
also poses some serious issues. So
Yeah.
somewhere between 50 and 100.
I like the idea for
And no veto
quarterly
power.
meetings having something like 2/3 majority present, or like any sort of ratification to the bylaws needing at least a 2/3 majority.
Yeah.
I think though, James, you have to be really careful with what those expectations are. Like because you don't know what types of businesses you're going to be hosting here. You don't know which businesses are going to be involved and the people who are going to be partaking in that. So setting up, at least 2/3 or having mandatory monthly meetings or even quarterly face-to-face meetings may not work realistically across 10 separate businesses with 100 members, each with their work lives, plus personal lives and families and so on to deal with. That's a huge expectation. I know that I even struggle with making like monthly meetings when I was on a board of directors. It was absolutely ridiculous to try to coordinate 7 people as that once a month expectation that were there. So that's something to be mindful of as well, that it's wonderful and it's really motivating to think of the social side of things and to think of these regular get-togethers and regular potlucks and so on. But the practicality of it, like that model may not serve the businesses themselves and the individuals within.
So the way I would think of it would be, I hear what you're saying, and I think there's some wisdom to be heard in tempering expectations. Um, I guess my thought is, as long as we're all working within the 10-100, and the managers and the business, essentially we can all decide as members of the cooperative that we're going to sorry, someone just disappeared and that kind of threw me off. I lost my train of thought.
It happens.
It does.
You're full of ideas and your head is full of wonderful things, and it's hard to keep it all in track, isn't it?
Right.
No, what was the last thing I was saying? If I can
She
just
was,
hold on.
Sarah mentioned something about tempering expectations regarding people being able to meet all the meetings when dealing with the logistics of their own businesses.
Yeah, so if we're all working for the cooperative and the cooperative can just decide, okay, one Sunday a month, third Sunday of the month is going to be the Sunday that our businesses are closed, and that everybody gets paid for a 4-hour shift to come in, and that's when we do the update on the business. That's when every member owner it gets updated on the books. Are we making money this month, or do we need to hustle our buns for the last week? That's also when we pay our membership fee. So we just bake it into to how we operate the cooperative. So third Sunday of the month, all cooperative businesses are closed for the business, and then everybody shows up. We learn how our business is operating and whether or not we need to do something more to do better, or whether or not we're doing great, and we can look forward to the next month and how we're going to start spending our dividend checks. And just sort of bake that administration day once a month into the how we do business, and then because the morning is already set, maybe that's when we do training for different businesses. The afternoon we do sign off on any legal things or do administration things for our businesses, whatever is there. And then in the evening, we got the rest of the day off, so we can just hang out. And that's where the idea of Kaylee comes into play, or the what do you call potluck. And it doesn't have to be, but it is an interesting and intriguing way of doing things differently.
I think it's when it comes to something like having a potluck with people where, like company picnics or whatever, like people can come if they're welcome, but we're going to understand that not everybody can. But when it comes to specific votes, we do have the technology to be able to pose the question and have everybody vote in their own time and just have a deadline. There's no reason why we can't just get together. Maybe if we need to have discussions about it, present the question and then let the businesses talk amongst themselves as how that works within their business and everything. And then if the person, the manager, the elected manager can't come, that they can send a representative with their vote.
I've just posted in the chat here a link to a website called lumio.org.
Okay.
This is, I recommend everyone to check it out. There we go. Hello, Geoff. Glad to have you back. I encourage everybody to check out Lumio because this is an intriguing software that's used by a cooperative that started either in Australia or New Zealand or someplace way over there in that direction. And instead of it's a digital platform that allows for decision making between different groups of people. So it allows for decision making that would be business specific, as well as decision making that would be for the cooperative as a whole in this particular example. And it allows for more options than just yes or no, nay. It also allows for this doesn't affect me, I'm good to go with whatever the whole is, or I abstain, this, I don't have a say in this idea. So there are a couple of different options within this sort of software that would go a long way to helping people. So we can create groupings of people within the cooperative, for example, people who may be working in the childcare part of the cooperative, who need to get some sort of feedback or decision-making process as to how they're going to work out their budget for this particular quarter. Well, the people in the workers in the flagons and dragons don't necessarily need to be a part of that conversation, so they don't have to be. So we can break up decision-making amongst that sort of thing using this sort of program. And even when it comes to working on things, potentially like on budgets and stuff, maybe? I don't know. I have to look a little bit more into this program. Sorry, lost steam on that particular thought.
You're talking about buttons.
Well, talking about the digital age and the fact that we can use, there are different tools out there that already exist that can make the operating of our cooperative a lot more smooth, we shall say.
Now, there definitely is something to be said for businesses like their in-person discussion. So if it comes to a point when we do need to meet in person for efficiency's sake, there's either online here, face-to-face, or something like that. But again, if the manager isn't available, find a time that works for most people, and then anybody still not able can send like a set of notes on the talking points so that people can discuss in person. There's endless options. So despite there being an online option for just clicking buttons and hitting votes and typing in, we have this discussion, there's really no substitute sometimes for face-to-face, even if that requires a substitute.
Well, and that's where having like a set aside once a month, we always meet on the third Sunday of the month, and that's set aside, and that's where we take care of that kind of business. And then have a mechanism in place so that, if you can get X amount of workers within a business to go to the manager and say, hey, we need to have a business meeting. Can you call one? We have the minimum amount of members of the business. Let's say it's 15% of the members of the business can call for a meeting, or maybe it's 50% of the members. Does anybody have any experience with this sort of thing where there's like a precedented number or amount?
Well, I think with individual businesses as well, there would be, you know, the regular co-op meetings, but individual businesses would have regular meetings as well. Like
Yeah.
you're talking about the childcare portion. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, they would have to have, you know, their monthly staff meetings or bi-weekly, whatever it would be. And most other businesses would function the same way. So are you talking about like that individual businesses would then, you know, how would they then call on their managers to have a meeting with the cooperative or within the business itself? I'm
I was thinking within the business itself. The way I understand the co-op laws in Ontario, the members come together and they elect the board. The board of directors then has access to the money, and they're the ones who are legally on the docket, so to speak, for keeping track of the money and you know, being responsible for it. And so the board of directors would then compile a budget and then for individual businesses, and then give that budget to the manager, and the manager would then be responsible with that budget for running the business.
Right, but how does that work in a co-op model?
Oh, that is the co-op model.
So
so the board of directors in this particular case, they're going to be responsible for the membership fees that we bring every single month, you know, and from that, the board of directors, from the direction of the members of the cooperative, will then create a capital startup budget for new businesses, or create an ongoing budget based on the revenue generated from the existing businesses for their monthly operating expenses, labor, supplies, all the fun stuff. And then whatever is left over goes to split between the capital fund and the dividend fund based on how many businesses we have up and running.
so is this volunteer? This would be a volunteer-based board of directors, right?
No, so and anytime the board does board stuff, they would get paid the same like every other worker, the $20 an hour for doing their stuff. So that gets part of the administration. So then the board then becomes the part of the core of the administration business. So we've got the 10 businesses that make money, and then we've got the administrative business that takes care of all the.
How is that not a
functions.
conflict of interest though? Because in other businesses,
Mhm.
employees of an organization cannot be on the board of directors.
I believe within the cooperative, they have to be members of the cooperative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have links to like
Yes.
like legal sites and so on to look into this?
Yes.
I'm just curious.
I will pull. There's actually a link to the 98-page treaty. I think it was 98 pages of legal gobbledygook about.
And
how
who
to
have you had look
make
through
the
that
cooperative
personally,
separate.
though?
Hey,
And who have you had look through that personally?
I have looked through about the first quarter of it, and my brain is slightly broken having done so.
Yeah, the legal stuff's going to be a real challenge.
So that's when, again, for me personally, until you have a lawyer on board, none of this means anything. Like,
well, the good news is that there are associations within Ontario and who actually have created handbooks to help Joe, regular average person, figure out how to start and operate a cooperative within Ontario. So as our 10-100 idea starts to coalesce, we have a little bit more interest, we got a little bit more of a structure to build around. And I've actually already started reaching out to some of these people with the hopes of being able to create something a little bit more solid, a little bit more further, because this is.
You mentioned there being a lawyer who was interested in the concept in the last meeting.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I wrote him this morning as well, so he's a
that'd
tax
really help.
lawyer.
yeah, that would be
Perfect
like
if we had a lawyer in the.
mandatory, pretty much.
I mean, I would love if there was a law student out there who was interested in cooperatives who would agree to be a member of the cooperative and get paid the $20 an hour just like the rest of us doing the law stuff.
Yeah.
What are their legal requirements when it comes to running Mossy gatherings? They have to have some legal coverage, right? So it's not like any pre-existing business won't have legal experience, right? Like we're talking about creating businesses, we're also talking about bringing businesses on board.
Can anybody hear Curtis?
Not
Not very well.
You want to come over and
So Mossy and Laura, like what are and John, hi. What are the qualifications you guys have to go through on a legal basis, like through SOCAN for your artists, and like just because you're an established business, right? Like you have a copyright to Mossy gatherings and etc. Like we're talking about not just building businesses, which might be a different legal area, but we're also talking about the potential for established businesses to come on board. So they're going to have legal experience too, right? Like they have to, right? Like if the Bleeding Carrot wanted to come on board, Jim has to have insurance and etc. Like,
Yeah.
so I mean, like,
yeah, and part of being a member of the cooperative would be that we would have corporate insurance. You would get access to hopefully discounted rate.
It depends on what businesses are part of the cooperative. You need specific insurance for specific things. Like for instance, with Mossy Gatherings, we would have to have a $2 million liability insurance for events. So if something
Also, those
happens-
people are not on your side.
The insurance people?
Yeah, go figure. They have lawyers, but they're not lawyers that are going to give you time to sort through your stuff.
Well, you might be surprised if we had we might have a little bit more say and power if we had a 100-person strong corporation, number corp.
Sorry.
That.
But again, I don't.
I just want to hear what Mossy was saying.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Mossy. You were giving some good specifics there.
Oh no, I was just saying that like for Mossy Gatherings, we needed to have $2 million liability for anything that could possibly happen during an event, and what other legal stuff did we have to do? We had to have a business certificate from the city, and also a provincial certificate that recognizes that we are a organization. Also, if it's nonprofit, or if you get into if there's certain businesses in the cooperative that is nonprofit, there's a whole whack of things you have to think about there as well.
Well, and we were talking about this, Laura and I, as well last Monday about what happens when you have a business that you don't want to necessarily run for profit, but you've got other cooperative businesses that are definitely run for profit. So how does that affect us tax structure at the end of the day?
Have you talked to an accountant, like a CA about that, or CPA?
I have an accountant friend.
Yeah, you're going to need a CPA who really, really knows the law inside out for both for-profit, nonprofit, and cooperative models of business, that they have experience with all three of those, so they can give you sound advice on how those would intersect and interact within the tax structure. Yeah.
And when the 10100 is up and running properly, like especially when we've got 10 businesses, the core business, the administrative aspect of it, will definitely have its own tax and an accounting department that handles precisely these sorts of things with people full time. You know what I'm saying?
If I can interject again, there was an objection that insurance agents aren't on your side. Like if we're talking about cooperatives, that's basically the initial beginning of the history of cooperatives in Canada, is that they began to provide things like farming insurance, right? Those were begun as cooperatives. So we could actually, in building a cooperative, be seeking insurance cooperatives that would be totally on board with us, because they'd be like, wait, you're trying to do something like we're doing, just not exactly 100% financially, right?
I mean,
so be like,
I don't know if those still exist, but also,
Oh, they
yes, you'd
totally
have to
do,
find that.
James. Like the bank on the bank on the east side is the cooperators. Like they totally
So,
still exist.
but I mean, like,
Well, speaking from experience, I
largely,
just
but
recently
yes.
had a house fire, and we have a really good relationship with our cooperators insurance, and they've been treating us very well. So they were on our side after we had a house fire, that's for sure.
I am happy to hear that.
Not a sponsor.
Yet.
Yet.
But I mean, even James and I, when we were first talking about the idea of the 10100 cooperative, we had talked about the possibility of having a credit union as part of all of this as well. I'm not 100% certain. There might be laws on the book. I know there are in the States. I don't know how it works in Canada, but there are actually laws that prevent cooperatives and credit unions from being in bed with each other. So, I mean, turns out capitalists and big banks don't like competition. Anyway. So I feel like there were a couple of different things there. We were talking about insurance, and I think like at some point insurance would definitely be something that would be handled through the core administration, although there might be individual insurance for individual businesses, at which point the manager then becomes the face of the business for insurance purposes or liability purposes or things like that, and that becomes one of the roles of a manager of a business, to liaise between the core administration, which is comprised of the board of directors. Oh, and that was the other thing, the idea like that the board splitting up the cooperative the way it is, we've got 100 members, and that's the pool of labor for our for every cooperative business. And then each business will have a manager, and ultimately the people who propose businesses might start off being the default manager, or if we bring in what do you call pre-existing businesses that already have owners, they would have the option, sort of like the first mandate of being the manager of the business as it comes in and becomes integrated into the cooperative. But once the business is established and the workers of each business understand the roles of how a cooperative is different from showing up and working at a traditional capitalist business where you just show up for a paycheck and go home and you're now hands off. Uh, in this sort of environment, oh shoot, lost my train of thought again. Shoot, what was I saying?
Management.
Right, they're pretty awesome.
And how whether or not they're involved on the floor of the business or if they're hands off. You're saying about how businesses, the current business model is the manager just gets paid, or the owner gets paid and they don't have to be there.
Oh yeah, well the worker gets paid, and then they leave, and the worker just, I mean, you show up for a paycheck, and that's about it now, right? I forget where I was going with all that. I'm gonna go back and listen to this later on and go, oh, that's where I was starting at the beginning of the conversation, and go, one of my notes for personal growth here is that I need to work on being more brief and concise.
Well, I vote for Laura to be our secretary. She seems to keep us on track.
I'm pretty good at interpreting things and breaking them down.
Oh, we're talking about what is it called? Credit unions at some point. Oh well. It would be really interesting to be able to start our own little bank within it all, though. To be able to, instead of having to go to other banks to put our money into, we could just create a credit union where the money that we make in the cooperative stays in the cooperative and then becomes more seed money for more projects and stuff like that. So it'd be very interesting to see if we could do that. Because instead of the Toronto Dominion Bank getting to have all our money sitting in the bank while we figure out what we're going to spend it on, and them getting interest on it while
Yeah.
it's sitting there waiting on it. We could just keep it within our own credit union. That'd be really cool. And then we could reinvest that money where we want to invest it, as or we could at least point boards of directors for the bank, which is a lot better than what I can do for Toronto Dominion right at the moment, which I think is bend over and take it.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm. So, in talking about so far we've talked about having a code of ethics, and I've talked about bylaws. I wanted to talk a little bit as well about uh, like exploring how one would resolve conflict and what kind of conflict could come up within this sort of business structure or business model, and so that we can avoid it in the future. If that makes any sense.
Was there a particular kind of business you were looking for? Is it just kind of any and all small business, or is there like a list of things you had in mind?
Actually, diverse businesses would be preferable. Anything from industrial manufacturing to service-based industry, to customer service, to sales, to uh, even something like trade related.
If
We've
you
talked about.
scroll up the conversation, yes, the last meeting we had, I actually
Mhm.
wrote down and posted a list of businesses that we were considering as starters. The main
That's
ones that
right.
we sort of want involved, plus a few additional ones that for later growth. And I don't think I still have that picture on my
Hold
camera, but it's
on.
in the Facebook conversation. It's posted there.
There we go. Department store. We had well, it's down here. It's listed as bar in quotations, flagons and dragons, or parentheses, I should say. And anybody who's listened to me has probably heard me talk about my Flagons and Dragons sports bar for geeks idea. We talked about a taxi service, a tattoo parlor, which I think is I'll talk about that at some other point. Having a car shop, like a mechanic, with a used car lot on the side. Having a contractor business in their childcare as a benefit that the cooperative provides, not just to the cooperative, but also to the community as well. So once I talked about one of the core benefits almost right from day one is that we would have childcare. So if you are working for a cooperative business and you got kids, don't worry, fam, we got you. We're watching your kids. And as the amount of businesses that we have grows, and as demand and need for our childcare services grows, we're going to plan and adapt for that as we grow along, keeping in step with all the the legal requirements and all that other good stuff along the way, but also funding it and making that a part of the core business model is. Anyway, I get excited about that because I was chatting with a friend of mine this morning who is an excellent dungeon master about the possibility of him taking on a job where he would be doing an after-school program with school-age kids, uh, doing Dungeons and/or Dragons, and how that would be his job in the cooperative, getting paid a living wage, looking after kids, playing Dungeons and Dragons 5 nights a week. I mean, that's a dream job for me, and he would be brilliant at it. And I think he thinks it's too good to be true. I want to prove him wrong. And I would love for at least my kids to be able to go to an after school program where they get to play D&D as something. I think that would be really, really cool. Or at least, if while I'm working a shift, they're off being a part of something that is really, really fun while at the same time, oh, well, you guys know what after school programs are like. Um, yeah. I just get really excited about that idea. I remember what I was looking for. Book publishing, financial management. Re- restaurant. What else do we have? An art market. Did we talk about an art market, Laura?
No, I just added it to it because I think we mentioned something about something like the artist co-op. I think you said something like, "Oh yeah, we could do like something similar or incorporate them or something to that ilk." So I thought, I just wrote it down.
And of course, everybody's perennial favorite, having a grow op.
That was your idea.
Guilty. Well, I don't know actually that was my idea, although I think it's a brilliant idea. It was definitely something Curtis insisted on greatly. Although I think, for my money, it's a long-term moneymaker. It's not an immediate moneymaker, if it's a moneymaker at all. Although one can imagine, if done correctly, I mean, it's a weed, for crying out loud. It should be a moneymaker if done right. But if nothing else, having, for those of us who are members of the 10100 cooperative who are also medical cannabis users, having a place that can grow so that we can get it at a ridiculous cost as opposed to, what those of us who have a prescription pay for now, which is through the nose. Oy vey. At any rate, so those are some of the core business possibilities, Geoff. As far as businesses go, the only thing I was really concerned about was having. Thank you, Laura.
Welcome.
The only thing I was really and a local news organization. Excellent. That's for the ands in our group. Well, and the Sarahs. But having a multitude of diverse businesses, because one of the things I've learned is that businesses are all profitable at more or less different times of the year. So having different businesses that have their high times of the year spread out so that all throughout the year, at least one of our businesses is turning a surplus. That's sort of the basic idea that I want to sort of go with. So as far as businesses go, I don't have a set amount of businesses that I have to have in order for the 10100 to operate. I have a couple of businesses that I'd like to be on there, one of which is my idea for the Flagons and Dragons, a sports bar for geeks. But if I can't get 100 other people to agree that that's going to be a viable business here in the Grey Bruce, I'm okay with that, so long as we can get 10 core businesses that will be viable here in the Grey Bruce, that will turn a surplus, make those the 10 core businesses. I'll work in any decent business that'll I'm okay with doing work. I'm okay with doing hard work. I just want to do work for something that I'm going to get an actual return on my investment more than a paycheck at the end of the week. And something where
actually care about, where you're not just getting taken advantage of.
Yeah. And it's something where we're working together. To at least the philosophy is we're working together to pool our resources to create something that we can all go to that meets the needs of our local community, that at the end of the day also pays our mortgage. Well, and eventually we get to the point where the cooperative just buys out our mortgages as well. I've been inspired by learning how the one percenters live, and about how they basically got a business for everything that they do. I don't know if it's we all look at that from the outside looking in, or outside looking at them saying, geez, it must be nice. And I'm thinking, yeah, it must be nice. Why don't we do that? Why don't we just make it, instead of um, benefits for the 1%, it's benefit for all of us who are members. And that way we can just keep it within the business, and we don't have to take it out and get taxed on it, as it were. Or it can become a business write-off. or at least that's for some ideas. I'm thinking about vacations at this point, and various other things. Side businesses, adjunct businesses and benefit businesses. The adjunct businesses could be something like a Flagons and Dragons. If it's not a moneymaker for the core 10 businesses, so long as I can be a part of the core 10, or sorry, so long as I can be a part of the 10-100, eventually I can propose that something like Flagons and Dragons be an adjunct business. And adjunct businesses would then be, the startup costs would be fueled through our dividends. So instead of directly from the capital fund. And that just makes it so that we can reinvest. It's a way of reinvesting the money that we make into different businesses that we would want to do, but are maybe a little bit more risque as it were, aren't necessarily going to be major money makers, but might break even. We can do those sort of businesses later on when our core 10 businesses are up and running and are successful, and at which point our dividends are going to be worth something. I don't know, Geoff, does that help answer your question about the kind of businesses? Clear as mud?
Yeah, just looking at the list there. So you mentioned something about a living wage for like everyone involved, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. The idea would be that anybody who works a 4-hour shift within the 10-100 would get paid the living wage. I've been talking about it as though it'd be $20 an hour because it makes the math incredibly easy. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, when we incorporate and become a 10-100, part of the ratification process of the bylaws would also establish at that point what the living wage will be. And it'll be based on a calculation based on somebody working 20 hours a month or 20 hours a week, being able to make enough to cover their rent and such, which $20 an hour.
Yeah, I guess the trick would be those initial first businesses would have to pull in quite a lot. They'd have to be profitable, I guess, right away to do the living wage thing and all that.
So,
what types of businesses are immediately profitable that would also thrive in this area?
So one of the possibilities is a tattoo parlor. It has relatively low startup costs. You need sterilization machines. You need your supplies, needles, things like that, which, from what I understand, in traditional business, unless you have that money already ahead of time, you're borrowing that money from a bank, as an investment. And so that's why it takes a lot of businesses so long to become profitable, because they're busy playing catch up to pay back the money that they borrowed in order to start things up. Well, under our model, we're not borrowing any money. We're pre-compiling a pile of capital. So the only people we owe that money to is ourselves. And so
I've
we
shared sort
can,
of
if we,
down of that as a visual. I don't know if you can make sense of it, but it is there.
The obvious one for me is coffee shops. That's what Owen sounds about.
yeah, coffee shops. The key thing is, under our funding model, we pre-fund for the month or the quarter, actually. So we will guarantee the entire operating budget of a business for the entire quarter, and we'll pre-fund the month. So each business has whatever the hours that they have scheduled. The manager will have that budget, or will have an hourly budget that they will have to be able to work with in order to be able to schedule people. That payroll will then say, "Yep, that's good. We've got those people accounted for. Their hours are covered," and then they'll have money for a budget in order to make purchase for supplies, for things like that. And then for the next month, the business will basically be making money for month 2, for the budget of month 2, which we'll know ahead of time based on the amount of hours with expected supply costs, blah blah blah. And that's what that's part of the manager's responsibility, is being on top of what the supply costs are and having a budget for that. and being able to be accountable for that as well, for pricing, making sure that we're not paying $5 for things that we're turning around and then selling for $2 sort of idea. We want to spend $5 for things and then turn around and sell them for 15. You know what I mean? And that's partly the manager's responsibility, as well as working with the board who makes sure that each business is actually turning a surplus. Hold on, I forget the initial question I was answering now. I would like to apologize. Some of you know my medication has changed, and so I've been having the womp womps as my brain has been going into adjusting to the new chemical balance as I'm waiting for my prescription to be filled up by my doctor. So it's affecting my ability to stay on track with my thoughts sometimes. So I do apologize for that.
I think you were talking about to be helpful, and you're definitely forgiven. No worries about that there. I think you were running down how the first, I think the question was how the first businesses, how are they start and then they fund. And I've got a section that sort of, as you were alluding, you may have actually just answered the question. Yeah, basically everybody pools in money to start the first business, and then the first business funds the next one, funds the next one, funds the next one, sort of thing. Or like if they're a collective, as all the businesses are put together, is create a larger pool that then other
of
businesses
revenue
until we come to our full 10 and maybe some adjunct, etc. So it sort of grows on everybody putting in enough money to start the first one.
Correct. And the ratio of what goes back into the capital fund versus what goes into the dividend fund is the same as how many businesses we got versus how many businesses are waiting to be started. So if we have one business that's up and running, say for example, the tattoo parlor, which for what tattoos cost versus based on a 4-hour session, an average tattoo, a 4-hour session costs about $650, according to my tattoo artist friend who I had this discussion with. So $650 under the cooperative method, or the 10-100 structure. 80 would go to the artist for $20 an hour for 4 hours, which actually ends up being about $100 after you include about CPP, EI, payroll taxes, all that other fun stuff. So right off the bat, that 650 is down to 550. And if we break down the costs of doing business for the month of that business down to and spread it out across each individual 4-hour session, let's say we take about $50 from each 4-hour session to go to covering the cost of the supplies, the building, the insurance, the utilities, the cost of doing business. Then you're ended up with about $500 worth of surplus that then goes back into the revenue pile, as this is money we made, yay. So that's why I'm loving something like the tattoo parlor as one of the first businesses. Because I've got a couple of hungry tattoo artists who are, or at least one hungry tattoo artist who's really excited about this particular idea, but also because the profit margin is ridiculous on it. And that kind of money goes immediately back into the business. And again, if we only have one business, 10% of that revenue pile that's left over after we have figured out what the operating budget is for the next quarter, and all the bills are paid and all the other great stuff, all of the surplus, 10% goes to our dividend checks, and 90% goes back into the capital fund. So at that kind of money-making rate, our capital fund is going to be huge by the time we get to the next quarter, or the second quarter after the tattoo parlor has been established. At which point, instead of cutting ourselves big checks, that money then goes into starting and establishing the next business. And at which point we'll then have two businesses, and whatever it produces in terms of revenue at the end of that quarter, we will split it up between 80% will go back into the capital pile, and 10 or 20% rather, because of the two businesses, will go into our dividend pile. At which point we'll then split up what we made in terms of dividend checks or dividends, um, and cut ourselves either a check or reinvest those dividends back into the business through things like adjunct businesses or side businesses, which of course are little hobby businesses that we can set up for ourselves, that we can basically say, okay, I'm going to have like an 8-hour shift this week where all I do is wander through the Bruce Trail and take pictures. That's my job. And I'm going to, there we are, and I'm going to put my dividend shares into that little side business until I've got 8 hours a week that are covered for. So it's 8 hours is $200. So I just keep on putting dividend pips into that until I get $200 into that. And then 1 week a month, I'll get a shift where that's my job to go out and take pictures on the Bruce Trail, or whoever else it is. And that would be how side businesses work. I know nobody asked that question, but I'm just excited. It seems somewhat related to what it was I was talking about at the time, which now that I think about it, probably not related at all.
All right. Well, I have to leave you people, but
Hmm.
I hope your rest of your conversation's productive.
Thank you, James.
And yeah, it's nice hearing all of you guys' voices.
It's good hearing your voice too, James. Has anyone
See you,
told you that
James.
you're awesome yet today?
James?
You would be the first.
Oh, geez. Well, you're awesome, man.
Seconded. Later, James.
Oh, we should vote on this. Oh, no, he's already gone. All those in favor?
Yeah,
Oh, wait, hold on. We can show of hands here, can't we?
we can actually. That's a thing.
There we go.
And I'd have to stop sharing the screen, and it's too useful.
Oh, I know it is too useful. Geoff, did that answer any? I feel like that was another question that you initiated. I'm not sure if I answered it at all.
Yeah, I think so. I guess just there'd probably be a small number of businesses that really take off and start being successful. And then the other ones you said were like more experimental, or?
Potentially experimental. The idea being that the core 10 businesses would all be moneymakers. That's the idea. We want to finance and start businesses that will do well, especially in our local area, especially for our local area. I often think about things like a department store, and I think about something like Walmart, and I think as soon as Walmart can't turn a profit in this area, it's going to leave. It's going to do that because that's what it's done historically. Certainly in Midwestern United States, there are horror stories of Walmart moving into an area, tanking the local economy, putting all the local mom and pop stores out of business. And then when nobody around has a job anymore with which to buy what Walmart is selling, they leave. And there are ghost towns in the Midwestern states that have been decimated by Walmart, and have been for decades. It's quite obscene. And so thinking about that, having something like a department store as one of the cooperative businesses, whose mandate is, yeah, sure, to make money, but even if we're not making obscene amount of profit, we're here because we live here. And every dollar that gets spent in our department store probably is going to stay in our local community. It's going to go back into it and hopefully proliferate a lot more. And I think we can use that as a selling point for our cooperative. And one of the other selling points or features of the 10100, especially for existing businesses, one of the things that I want to build into it in the core administrative business is having a marketing and an advertising department, a department who specifically exists to help our cooperative businesses get the word out there that they exist, to get more customers in, and to be as savvy and as out there as we can be in terms of advertising and marketing. So to have a core group of people that just that are like that as part of the cooperative, that go around to then each individual business in order to work with those businesses to be able to do promotions and sales. I would love to be able to facilitate something like that, and not leave it up into each individual business to be able to facilitate their own marketing, but also have talented people who can basically go around from business to business as required to do the kinds of things that they need in order to grow and to get more customers, and ultimately to make us all a little bit more money and a little bit well off. Does that make sense? Oh, I'm liking that nod there. Thank you, John.
Yep.
Hallelujah, John. I see that hand.
I can see up your nose, John.
And here we have siblings, my friends. Yeah. Does that help answer some more questions there, Geoff?
Yep, yeah, I just came along for info because I didn't really know much other than what you mentioned just a few days ago there. So, and also I'm kind of hungry for things to do, seeing as we're not allowed to go outside. So,
I know, right? As a business owner, I'm curious to know, hearing about what I've been talking about, if what your experience with running a business has been, and whether or not you could see something like Scenic City operating in something like 10100 network.
it sounds really good for getting startup things that don't exist yet, you know, like ideas that people have for things that might be needed. And like, you know, you mentioned the Grey Bruce community. But yeah, it depends on what, like, the early businesses that adopted it would have to make, like, pull in a lot of money, it sounds like, to do the living wage and cover all the overhead costs and everything. So yeah, you'd have to find some kind of business that is not only needed but could be like really reliable from the get-go.
Mm. Or having a couple of different businesses that are like variously reliably turning money, or just even just little bits of money here and there, because it all adds up. And the greater or wider the net, hold on a minute, mixing my metaphors. But the more of us that there are, the the bigger it becomes, for lack of a better term, and that includes on terms of market share. Um, does that make sense? Because like as if say if somebody like you were to become a part of the cooperative, in addition to whatever, I guess with the option of getting access to uh, the surpluses of other businesses be attractive to you while being able to maintain operating the business that you've come to operate?
What do you mean, like other businesses that are like equivalent kind of, or and
Well, it's the idea that when because right at the moment, if Scenic City makes money, then you make money. If Scenic City doesn't make money, then you're tightening your belt, right? Under the cooperative model, uh, even if you yourself aren't necessarily making huge amounts of money, if other businesses within the 10100 are making huge amounts of money, your budget is covered, right? Yeah, your hours are covered. We just need to know how long you're going to be open for, when you're going to be open, and yeah, that sort of idea, right? And what your hours are versus how much money you made versus while you were open. And thinking about all of that, um, it's very, very quick and easy to sort of say it. I know it's so nuanced. There are so many complications to running a business. You know, being open for the hours that you're open while you're not always doing business, and then you'll like have sort of like a rush, you know, where you make all your money in the day for over the course of like 30 minutes, right? Or yeah. So with regards to that, sorry. Um, where was I going with that thought?
You mentioned the buying power earlier, and I think a lot of stores do that, like to be able to access cheaper, like freight and product costs through like distributors. They just like collect together and make huge purchases. So a
Yep.
lot of places do that, and it sounds kind of like that, but I guess with the variety of businesses being such different things, it might be tricky.
It'd be different, you know, because you're right. Because like, how does something with a 10-100 of different businesses get a collective buying power for something like gaming store supplies, right? You know, we've got a another possible business within the 10-100 that say, well, mention department store or contractors. You know, what do they have to do with buying supplies for a game store, right? So how do you get access to bulk purchasing power with different businesses that don't necessarily line up with the same business needs? That's a good question.
As far as retail goes, depending on what company you're ordering from, sometimes you can make a large order. So it's like if it's something that a small business like Geoff's store wants to order certain games or something, but you have to have like a certain amount of like the order has to be so big, otherwise they don't accept it. So you like just you deplete until you can fill that order, or you find someplace else to get the supplies you need. Whereas if you had multiple stores buying under that, then you could have like the department store needs, you know, toilet paper or whatever and a bunch of things from the supplier or whatever. And then if there's something else that the supplies that Geoff needs, he can put his order under that the umbrella of everything the department store is buying, and then it goes to both places.
Okay. And
So
under
it's like as a co-op. Does that make sense?
yeah, and so then under the 10-100 model, there would be somebody who'd be part of the core administrative business,
Yeah.
who would be responsible for coordinating bulk purchases between different businesses, who would then make an order sort of like that, who would then liaise with both, you know, Geoff in this scenario, but also with the department store manager in that scenario, and find out what they could collaborate in terms of bulk purchase. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So, and like, it doesn't necessarily need to be like Geoff's store and department store, but even like the photographer or any other business sort of thing. And as it gets bigger, or even like basic stuff, like if we get like the car up and running and stuff, like we can incorporate like, okay, what do people need this month? And then send that into our head sort of thing. And then they can make the order. And that would save everybody money as bulk. And everybody just sort of pays for what they ordered kind of thing. Like the portion of the overall cost divvied up kind of thing. And that should save everybody a whole lot of money.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like it might work pretty well for something maybe a little more narrow, like if it was 10 or 100 people with like a very, I don't know, more specific like focus of interest that were really committed to something, and they could work together on that, at least at first maybe.
Yeah, it's a thing that like the only issue that I can see with that is like there isn't like a grand supplier of everything that you can order from. You know, these things like a game.
Jeff Bezos
store.
would like to differ with that opinion, but
Well,
yes, continue.
yeah, but we're not ordering from Amazon.
No. No.
I mean, we could, but if we believe in workers' rights, do we really want to support his business model? But you know, getting supplies and things like that, as they tend to be a little bit more niched. So yeah, I can understand Jeff's point of like if the businesses were similarly constructed, that the supplies you're ordering, you know, it's easier to find a supplier that supplies for all these different businesses if all these different businesses are at least similar. at least in the beginning, and then when it gets to be a bigger thing, then there will be several in pocket sort of thing for several. You can make several different orders from several different places to fit the needs, but it is a definitely for beginning purposes. It is something that you would need more than one store that could make use of a supplier. You know, does our department store have any use for dice?
Probably. You could do. You know, just make sure it's in a completely different part of town, going for a different, demographic, so we don't have too much overlap. But even if we did, um, it doesn't matter too much because it's all going back to the cooperative at the end of the day, right?
That's true.
Which is all going back to the big, huge singular revenue pot that all the businesses pool into, and out of which we draw our operating budget and divide up our what's left over, the surplus, into capital or dividends, which
Yeah.
goes into our pockets.
Flagons and dragons would be similar enough that would need similar supplies as
Yep.
far as sterilizing equipment and things like that, cleaning supplies and stuff. You can order those for both the tattoo parlor and the pub.
Yeah, I like the idea
Some
of
overlap that you can do as far as ordering power goes.
hmm and having like I again conceive of the core business again made up of the booking, bookkeeping, accounting, legal, human resources, advertising, and things like bulk purchasing. That would be a great place for something like that that works between the different businesses in order to consolidate bulk purchasing practices. And yeah, that'd be a really good way of being able to go about it.
Yeah, I guess it'd be key to find the thing that this area needs the most, I guess. Like, it'd be hard to do. Like, you'd have to get people to go out and, see what people seem to need. I like the idea of the shuttle for the peninsula. Like, does the Airbus even go up there? I know a lot of people that would use that.
Yeah, the Airbus is expensive though. It's like
Yeah, it's and I think they were going to start a program of another bus going up there. That's obviously been postponed for obvious reasons. But I think our advantage in that is that if we're already making a run on a delivery or something, or we've already got overhead costs that cover a trip up there, and plus, the buying power, we can easily make it less expensive for the customer to use our service versus paying for an Airbus, because Airbuses really are expensive.
yeah.
Even the Greyhound keeps going up in price, and like they're pricing themselves out of the industry, and I don't think they quite understand that. But you want more people.
Hallelujah, John. I see that head nod.
Lower the price. You don't restrict it so that the only people who have cars can afford to ride. Because then why would they?
Right.
Anyway, that's my tangent for this one.
Yeah. I guess the way I conceived of this setup, having a diverse array of businesses was part of the strength. So the idea of like having a contracting business, which can be building houses during the summer and maybe doing interior renovations during the winter. You can have one business which does landscaping during the summer and does snow removal during the winter, that sort of thing. And having diversity in those sorts of situations is awesome. Having people that are flexible and being able to jump into different whatever the season requires or whatever the market demands, I think is really interesting. And what this provides is a solid foundation from which they can reliably pull a budget from which to fund whatever projects that they're going to be working on for like the next, in the contracting business. I'm thinking of like whatever the contract is, whether it's building a home or whether it's building building a building or what have you. Just sort of thinking right at the moment.
what does this area need? Like, um,
Jobs.
what, okay, but what can we provide? Yeah, but which sorts of businesses can we provide that are, going to have a fast and high profit, but also aren't going to be jeopardizing the viability of other local businesses. I know James had said, this town is all about coffee shops. Like, do you really want to put another coffee shop in there
Yeah.
that's going to piss off the 10 other coffee shop owners and take business away from them? Probably not.
No.
We, with a population of 23,000 people, and it's not just in town, we have to be really cognizant of that, of the businesses that we are taking on, and also looking further down the road, how do we choose the businesses consciously and ethically so that we don't suddenly become a monopoly within this town and become viewed as such by other businesses and patrons as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When James brought up the idea of the coffee shop, I was like, yeah, if something like the Bleeding Carrot would like to become a part of something like the 10100, I would love to bring them in. I don't know, like I would want to become an indirect competition to another coffee shop, though. Right?
Yeah, it's either, as far as coffee shops go, incorporate one that already exists or don't bother.
And I'm just saying that as an example. But there are a lot of other businesses. We're not going to put another. Let's say, we do have a lot of construction companies in Owen Sound already, and we won't put another independently run hardware store downtown or something like that, because we've got Fulfords, right?
No.
Yeah, likewise, we're not going to be putting another gaming store right in Owen Sound because we have Scenic City.
That's right.
I think we don't want to take away from what this town already has, and be very, very careful that, yes, okay, well, we may be offering a really good deal with like the living wage, the benefits and so on, that can absolutely make it feel appealing for pre-existing businesses to sign up with that. We don't want them to feel cornered and say, join us or your business is going to fold.
Yeah. Are you saying we don't want to be like the Borg? Yeah.
Yeah, I can just see, because this is a wonderful business model. However, our society, the town, the province, the country, the continent in which we live is a capitalist model.
Yes.
We're trying to fit a socialist business model into a capitalist structure.
Market system, yeah.
So exactly, it is a capitalist market. That is how all of the tax brackets are going to be working. That is how all of our legal overlords are going to be governing us. Everything is within that system. So we have to make sure that this is going to be, still viable in that sense, and not jeopardizing any of the other businesses that choose not to participate in a cooperative model.
So I just remembered. Thank you for reminding me, and I will put it in the link now, that someone had asked earlier for a link to the laws in Ontario, and they're now there in the chat room for everybody.
Boom.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So there are 187 articles. Enjoy.
Well,
Yeah, no, I've been going through it. It's quite interesting. I got through up to about halfway through Powers or Capital, somewhere around there.
And what is it without clicking on it here? Is it all the legal stuff involved with cooperatives?
Oh yes, this is the Cooperative Corporations Act of Ontario. So if and when the 10100 incorporates, this is going to be the law that governs our operation. So it's quite thorough. And apparently there's some new amendments being proposed to include e-currency or e-laws. That'll be interesting. Yeah.
And who knows, with this whole virus thing, it, you know, to us people, it's making it abundantly clear that capitalism is not the be all end all, but I think it's going to take a long time before society and those who hold the power actually relinquish some of that control and consent to changing those models. I don't know. I know I'm sounding really pessimistic and
okay.
like a downer here. I don't know.
How would our business model serve? Like, would our business model? Here's a question. As capitalism has been absolutely tested in that it needs customers and people buying power and everything to survive. The thing that, and that's what's making even some staunch capitalists sort of wonder, like, does this system really work? Not all of them, obviously, but there are a few that are starting to like open their eyes a bit and think, wait a minute, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Would ours survive a situation like this? Like, if the whole world ran as a series of cooperatives, could we survive this situation, or would we also suffer for it? Because if we're this is a major opportunity to look at the system that is in place and really work to put things in place that protect people, that, you know, that are a definite improvement, especially if, you know, capitalists are starting to wonder whether or not their system is effective, that if they start looking at cooperative models such as ours, and ours would do work in a way that would survive something like this, that they could then, you know, it gives us a little bit more credibility, a little bit more, you know, viability as a model, as far as something to look for and look towards as far as like switching or adapting.
See, I don't see though, like the current struggle with all businesses really that's being felt right now. It's not a flaw within the businesses themselves. It's a flaw within the entire overarching structure. So as long as that structure is still in place, then yes, even our cooperative model would suffer, because look at Eat Local, look at the Artist Co-op.
Yeah.
They're struggling, and they're cooperative business models.
Yeah.
They are
But
still
as long as people
subject.
aren't buying stuff,
Yeah,
you
they're
can't
still
pay your
subject to that.
employees. Yeah.
So it's not a matter of, you know, how much, you know, how can we do things so differently that we will not be at risk or susceptible to any of these, you know, dangers.
There's nothing, as far as I can tell, inherent within the cooperative model that will guarantee it from being able to be weatherproof from these sort of financial instabilities.
I
like a
am
recession.
noting, and I was going to bring this up too, is that people have, like certain politicians, Doug Ford, for one, has talked about how he doesn't want to be reliant on exported goods, and that there are certain places like industrial building materials and things like that that are like that should be then built here, and that we should provide, because like. And I'm wondering, is this the opportunity to jump in on that? Like, could we start making health supplies and things that like normally we import? And it would replace a lot of the jobs that people are losing in factories. And since the province is now interested in reinvesting in businesses that create jobs locally, we could use this opportunity to maybe one of our businesses be a factory that produces medical supplies and equipment and things like that that would be needed in an emergency situation.
Man, you know, if we had the 10100 up and running right now, we could table that and vote on it. And then start putting, you know, resources towards something like that. But to address the issue of how do we prevent, dying on a on the sort of economic downturn, one of the things we could do, in addition to like thinking about, I wish I had recorded this. Sarah, I may have sent you the screenshots the other day when I was using all the little uh, roach butts to represent. Um, I remember that.
Yes.
So for everybody, I was trying to visualize because I'm a tactile visual person sometimes. In order to see how this would work under my under the 10100 model, uh, I was uh, building a trial quarterly or yearly run uh, uh, for the tattoo parlor model, where based on the idea that the tattoo artists would be working about individually about 20 hours a week. There'd be 3 tattoo artists plus 1 person running the desk, so we'd have 4 people. uh, um, 1 person would be working full-time. The other 3 artists would split the hours at the tattoo parlor up. I won't go too much into the details, but at the end of the day, suffice to say, each little um, uh, little thingy that I pulled from the from this. So we got I had a pile of this stuff. Yeah. And so that's what I was using instead of pebbles, because it was too cold to go outside that particular day. Otherwise, I would have used gravel or pebbles or something. Anyway, point of the matter is, I would create little piles and move things forward in order to visualize, uh, based on expected revenues, what that kind of business could expect to turn in terms of monthly revenues versus whatever its expenditures were. And the amount of the pile that I had left over at the end of the quarter that represented the surplus that that business made was, well, it just made me go like this, with the fingers and everything. It was very exciting. And uh, taking something like that, once the first months of the next quarter's budget is removed from that amount, um, I was thinking, it's very simply, you then take the rest and put it towards capital and or dividends. But before you even get to that point, you could theoretically take 10% off and put it towards savings, for like the next month as operating costs, so that, or the next quarter's operating costs, so that before uh, uh, we even go forward, there is 10% of whatever we made that quarter set aside, that is for the rainy day, for when we have a global pandemic and things are beginning to all fall apart, and we still want to pay our mortgages at the end of the month because we haven't built the business to the point where the cooperative has started paying off all our mortgages through the debt buyback program or through the housing program. And so that would be one potential way of instituting that, built into the 10100 model, is that before we even cut ourselves a check, we're putting 10% aside to savings for a rainy day, for days like this. Would something like that satisfy where you were going with, Sarah?
Um, I think it's going to have to depend on what the businesses are, though. I mean, yeah, that's good in theory, but if it's something with a really low profit margin, 10% is not going to cut it. And, when we think of 10% spread across 100 members, I don't know. Again, it's going to depend on some of those.
That's part of the reason why I suggested a factory and something that supplies something to an essential service, because that's something that wouldn't shut down and isn't dependent on people going out shopping or getting tattoos done.
Well, and
Right.
that's an awesome point, Laura. And I think you are absolutely right that we, the province is going to be turning back towards more manufacturing. And so when you're thinking of where do we source materials and so on and doing bulk orderings and stuff, I think we need to start looking at where are we able to get, what is an essential product that we could feasibly manufacture here that we could do well enough that we would, get whatever supplier contracts for whichever businesses, hospitals, labs, whatever it is. But I think we are going to have to look at that specifically, from province-wide perspective.
Hmm.
And
We're
figure
supplying
out-
to the entire province and even beyond something that is absolutely necessary no matter what's going on in the
yeah,
world. Then especially like supplying to that grand a thing, that business alone could carry the weight
yes.
throughout the situation, throughout whatever crisis, and allow all of those businesses to survive survive the storm, as it were.
Yeah.
Oh, and just the point as well about putting 10% aside. That would be 10% of like the global revenue. So the revenue that all the businesses together generate would be 10% of that would be put aside,
Yeah.
rather than 10% of individual businesses. So the
Okay.
idea being that even if an individual business itself is only just generating enough to break even,
Right.
or maybe even necessarily not breaking even because it's the slow season for that particular business. The idea that because all the cooperative businesses are putting into one giant resource pool, hopefully overall the cooperative will be healthy, even if one or two individual businesses aren't necessarily pulling the rate this particular quarter. Overall, it's the idea of spreading out the risk, right? And diversifying. Yeah. But even then, and that's why the 10 core businesses are so important in this particular situation. And the idea that they actually be moneymakers. And then that having those 10 core moneymakers then allows us to then turn around and create other businesses that aren't necessarily huge moneymakers, but are all the business that we want to do, that we want to work at or we want to have. And I don't know, for my money, this is this is a way of doing it, the 10-100 model. And
I would think moving forward, because we're getting sort of end of time, but it would be something that to look for is what companies, are there any manufacturing companies, or is there any, is there any, keep an eye out for any new laws or any new opportunities that the province might present that we can then use and bring it to the next meeting. So keep an eye on any kind of news. If there's a company that is looking to move here, or that the province wants to bring kind of thing, can we offer them a labor force under our model? Would they be interested? Is there someone we can talk to, or do we start the whole thing from scratch?
Yeah.
It would really depend, because if it's a company that's usually makes stuff, in China or Bangladesh or something, and they have to adopt a model over here anyway, and we say, well, this one's both profitable or whatever, or at least take their manufacturing or any information we can get from any of this potential that could be coming out of this situation, it would be definitely something that we should all keep a close eye on, because that could be extremely beneficial. Is there anybody working within these companies that would be willing to shift their resources and their knowledge into our model, and start it up that way? It's definitely something to look at.
And just a thought that occurs to me, because everybody and their uncle right at the moment are going to be thinking about how to make ventilators, it would be very interesting to be turning our thoughts to what complementary businesses, or not even complementary, but what's the word? Businesses that everybody's going to be neglecting because everybody's dropping everything to make ventilators. You know, what?
A lot of like breweries and stuff are temporarily switching
Yeah.
to hand sanitizer.
Just thinking that actually, yeah, having a distillery, but that does deal more in the sanitizers. But
yeah, any other kind of, like, as far as it would be worth talking to somebody in the medical field and ask them, because they would know more than anything. Everybody's talking hand sanitizer, ventilators, toilet paper, and nobody's talking something else. So yeah, definitely worth finding somebody in the medical industry being like, what's the next thing that you're going to run out of? What's the next thing that's going to pose a problem?
And if you look at the PPE that, is given routinely, let's say in China and in Asia, where they're having full body gowns, and we're focusing on gloves and masks. Where are the gowns? Where are the full body PPE suits? Why is that something that is not being seen at all in our hospitals over here?
And like sterilization sheets, dividers between hospital beds, cleaning products for wiping down surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about just mixing the bleach and stuff, but there are other things that, like, who's making, or people are going to run out of cleaning, surface cleaners and stuff that is adequate. And can we find a way, like, a way of making one that's safe for touch and contact and stuff that also kills the virus? Because a lot of the ones, like, I remember Spray 9, using it when I worked at cleaning police cars, and all I did was I wiped down the seat, and then I wiped down the back of the front seat, and I lost my balance, put my elbow on it, and I had a rash that lasted 5 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So some cleaning products are safer than others for contact. That one was very, very permanently corrosive. It took a lot of shea butter and moisturizers and stuff, and it took a long time. So so that's something, is like, if people want to go and they're working in places where they have to touch the surface, like, almost immediately afterwards, like, there are certain, like, grocery stores and retail and things like that that are essential services. What are they using to wipe down their counters? And is it safe to touch within seconds afterwards? Because you can't control when a customer's going to want to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something because, like, that's a very narrow product line, and how much of that is out there at the moment, and are they going to run out of it?
And a lot of alcohol-based cleaners are effective because it kills on contact, so you don't need to leave the alcohol on the surface for several minutes or whatever. It kills on contact, and then it evaporates almost immediately. So by the time it's dried, it's done. And it dries quickly. It evaporates within.
Yeah, the Spray 9 was dried pretty quickly, but not quickly enough, because it was still, like, it was not very wet. The surface was not.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
I used to work with Spray 9 at when I worked at CTS. I had the set of rubber gloves that I used with them for 1 month, and then I put them on the shelf, and I came back 3 months later, and they basically, like, become like this rubber glue, sort of like weird goopy mass. It was quite exciting. And I thought, geez, I handled that stuff for like a month straight. Woohoo, that's going to be exciting. Oh, man. Well, Laura, you're all right. We've definitely come up on that 2-hour mark, and I would just like to thank you, everybody, for participating in a conversation about the 10100 today. Lord knows I enjoy talking about it, and I really enjoy exploring the concept. And I'm really hoping that we can move to a point where we can start organizing and start building something that can really hopefully change our circumstances for the better. So yeah.
Thanks, James.
Yeah.
Has
I'll
anybody
be...
told you that you're awesome yet today? Beat you to it.
I'll take it. Thank you very much. We'll hopefully be hosting this conversation again next week, Monday, 5 to 7, same time. And I'm going to be giving a lot of thought to the kind of manufacturing base that Owen Sound and the greater Owen Sound area could utilize. I'd had a dream once upon a time about creating an industrial scale project where we would turn used shipping containers into LED, what do you call, greenhouses, to be able to be utilized, like insulated and then utilized in far north places in order to make produce en masse, so that it would become cheaper, especially for places that are off the highways and byways of Ontario's highway structure system. So I'm thinking specifically like First Nations places, and even far north where getting fresh produce, like in the territories, which is incredibly difficult and very expensive, being able to have a manufacturing base that creates basically order to set up a series of connected modular shipping containers that you just order a dozen, and we send them to pre-manufactured to start growing your tomatoes or your potatoes or whatever staples you can't grow in your particular environment year-round. At that, it'd be great. Anyway, something to talk about next week, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. Regardless, you guys are all awesome, and I look forward to the next time when our paths cross.
Get to meet some new people tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks again. It's good to throw ideas around.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Cheerio.
Uh,
See you later.